Chapter 5. Invitation to the dance. Otto led me through the ballroom, weaving between dancers, until we reached the far corner where a small crowd was gathered around a woman dressed as Medusa. She looked to be in her mid-20s and stood at the center, surrounded by young men and women who leaned forward as if she were a painting they needed to view more closely. Her voice carried easily despite the music, with her admirers hanging on her every word. Her costume was striking, a draped chiton in white silk, clasped at one shoulder with a bronze serpent brooch. More golden serpents coiled through her dark hair, which fell loose down her back in a style that was surely scandalous to the matrons in the room. She wore an exquisite silver colombina, its surface etched with delicate snakes along the temples and around the eyes, with her thin red lips left uncovered. The group parted as we approached, making room for us to join them.
"Otto!" one of the young men called out. "You've returned with a companion."
Otto pulled me forward. "Marie, I have someone I would like to introduce you to." The woman stepped closer, as if I were an object in need of more intimate examination. Her dark brown eyes took in the whole of me. "We are already well acquainted." This surprised me, as I had never met this woman before. She continued, "You dare bring this woman, Athena, into my presence, the very goddess who reduced me to such a wretched state and provided Perseus with the mirror he used to slay me." I blinked, surprised by the reference. She was correct. Athena had been the one who wronged Medusa, transforming a beautiful priestess into a monster because Poseidon had violated her in Athena's temple. It was an old story, and most people no longer remembered that Medusa had been the victim. "I must beg your pardon," I said, recovering my composure. "I do hope that bygones will be bygones. I was jealous, you see. Poseidon had lain with you in my temple, and I punished you for his transgression. It was wrong of me to curse you so." She tilted her head, considering. Slowly, she reached out and touched my chin with one gloved finger, her red lips curving into a smile. With her other hand, she took my gloved hand and brought it to those lips, pressing a kiss against my knuckles. "All is forgiven, dear Athena." As the kiss was delivered, a warmth bloomed in my chest and settled, somewhere a young woman of my upbringing was not permitted to acknowledge. Still in possession of my hand, she said, "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Marie von Czerwinski. And you are?" Still trying to compose myself, my name eluded me entirely. I looked to Otto for rescue. "Allow me," Otto said. "Frau von Czerwinski. May I present Fräulein Emilie Knopf, my oldest and dearest friend." "We were discussing Wagner," Marie said, releasing my hand and turning back to her audience. "I was saying that his genius is real, but his philosophy bankrupt. His theory that music, song, dance, poetry, and visual arts can be unified as a total work of art is a magnificent idea, executed with the ego of a man who cannot conceive that anyone else's contribution to that work matters as much as his own. His loathing of Jews is not incidental to his genius," a young woman said. I later learned her name was Harriet Zimmerman. For some of us, it is impossible to separate the two.
Marie's eyes narrowed with interest. "But shouldn't art be judged strictly on its own merit, regardless of the artist creating it?"
She did not appear to be stating her own position, but rather opening a space for argument. I had met very few people who asked questions in that manner. "It's an interesting argument," Harriet said, "but hard to do in reality." Otto spoke up. "If we must take the artist's opinions into account, we may be left with no art to enjoy. Every artist surely has some idea we might disagree with." "True," I said, "but some views are too repugnant to be ignored. They cast an ugly shadow on the work being produced." Marie turned back to me. "This is why I'm so glad to be in Berlin. In the country, these types of debates don't exist."
"Yeah,
"I have been to many of these balls," I said. "I've never heard such a debate before." "Perhaps it is you who has brought such a discussion into being." "I cannot believe that." She shook her head, serpents glinting. "I've only lived in Berlin for 6 short months, and I've had many similar conversations." "You must keep good company," I said. "I would very much like to meet that company. I rarely hear women discussing such ideas." Why shouldn't we discuss whatever interests us as the men do?
I agree, but I find women rarely want to discuss such things. If I want to discuss politics or philosophy, I must seek out the company of men, and men rarely want to engage in such discussions with a woman.
She looked shocked and turned to Otto. Otto, mein Lieber, you must invite this poor thing to your next salon. She is dying for the type of intellectual stimulation they provide.
I went still. Heat flooded my cheeks. I looked at Otto, who would not meet my eyes.
What salons? I knew nothing of any salons. Why had he never invited me? Did he think me not intellectually stimulating enough? I considered him one of my closest friends, and he was holding salons without inviting me?
Otto cleared his throat, stumbling through an apology. My salons have been for people older, from university. I did not know you would like to attend. He finally looked at me. Of course you will be invited to the next one.
I was glad I would be invited in the future, but surely he knew I would have wanted to attend. He had purposefully excluded me. I was glad he could not see my face beneath my mask. My cheeks burned with equal parts embarrassment and anger. I would learn later that Otto had been protecting me from knowledge that could have harmed us both. The orchestra struck up a new piece. Marie's eyes closed, her head tilting back as the opening notes filled the room. She swayed, serpents in her hair writhing, her entire body responding to the music before the melody declared itself. Her eyes opened. They were looking directly at me. Do you know this song? I listened. It sounds familiar. Invitation to the Dance, a waltz by Weber. It's one of my favorites. I concentrated on the melody now unfolding. Oh yes, I hear it now. I paused. That is a lovely waltz, but a bit complicated. I'm surprised the orchestra is playing it. They must be bored, Marie said, amused, and wanting to show off. She extended her hand. We must dance. My chest tightened. Nein, I cannot. She did not lower her hand, did not speak. Simply stood there, dark eyes fixed on mine from behind that intimidating mask of hers. My pulse hammered. I'm not good enough to dance to this song. Trust me. Her hand remained. The silence stretched. Are you truly going to let this moment pass? Marie's voice dropped lower. Be bold. Are you not, Athena? I could not let her challenge go unanswered. I took her hand. She pulled me toward the floor with a sureness that left no room for doubt. Very few couples occupied the floor. The piece was too demanding for most. It was not unheard of for two women to dance together at a costume ball, but they usually danced to simple, playful songs, not one such as this. People were surely watching. Marie turned to face me, not yet initiating an embrace. The prelude is coming to an end. It is exactly 35 bars. How do you know? I'm a violinist and composer myself. Before I could register this revelation, she had taken me in her arms, the waltz beginning proper. She moved, and I had no choice but to follow. This was nothing like dancing with James. That had been pleasant and safe, the feeling of being guided by someone who knew the steps and would not let me stumble. Marie did not lead as a woman standing in for a man. She led as herself, not pushing, not pulling, but offering, creating space and trusting me to fill it. My body responded to her lead before my mind could register it, something about the way her hand rested at my waist, firm but not heavy, the way she anticipated my weight before I shifted it as though she were listening through her palms, the way she opened a path and waited, certain I would follow. And I did, every time, without knowing quite how she had asked. The music began slowly. We took long gliding steps, covering more ground than seemed reasonable. The suspension at the height of each turn was thrilling as we dropped into the next step. Marie's hand at my back remained a constant point of reference, a promise that I was in skilled hands. The tempo increased, our steps shortened, tighter circles now, spinning faster. The chandelier above became a blur of light. I forgot there were other couples on the floor, forgot the watchful eyes around the edges of the room. There was only the music and Marie's embrace, and the particular thrill of being led through space as though it were a canvas on which our feet were painting.
The song built to a crescendo. For one breathless moment, we seemed to be suspended in midair, weightless, before crashing back down as the music emptied into a bold passage. My heart stuttered. Time fractured.
During a particularly lyrical section, Marie pulled me in tight, and all that existed was the warmth of her embrace, the scent of her perfume swirling around me, and the dark intensity of her eyes holding mine. How she managed to lead us through the other couples without collision, I will never know.
The final measures arrived too soon. The music resolved as we slowed to a stop. I realized I had forgotten to breathe.
Applause erupted from the corner where Otto and the others stood. Others around the room joined in, the sound washing over me, pulling me back into a world that contained other people. Marie grasped my hand and bowed as if we had just given a major performance, the center of attention. All those faces turned toward us. Heat flooded through me, my chest constricted. I had gone from not breathing at all to breathing entirely too much, each sharp inhale insufficient. "Oh dear, Emilie, do calm yourself," Marie's voice cut through the roaring in my ears. "You did wonderfully, and everyone agrees."
We have danced many times since. I remember all of them. Not one has come close to the first.
"You need some air, as do I." Marie did not wait for a response. She guided me through the tall doors to the balcony. I followed, grateful to escape all those watching faces. The night air was cool against my heated skin. It carried the faint scent of the city beyond the Bleikröders grounds. I drew in a long breath, then another.
"I can't believe we just did that," I said.
Marie moved to the balcony's edge, her back to me. She began pulling off her gloves, one finger at a time. The kid leather peeled away to reveal bare skin beneath. She laid both gloves on the stone railing and flexed her fingers in the night air. It was such a small thing, removing one's gloves. Women did it constantly in the privacy of their homes. But here, on a public balcony with the music still drifting through the doors behind us, it felt like witnessing an act of physical liberation I was not sure how to interpret. Her fingers were those of a musician, strong and thin. Those were the fingers that had touched my chin in the ballroom. Those that had brought my own to her lips for that devastating kiss. Those that had held me while we danced, now uncovered before me in the moonlight. "Dancing does warm one, doesn't it?" Marie said.
It was not just the dancing that was warming me, but I could hardly say that.
"You mentioned you are a violinist and composer." "Did I?" Her smile suggested she knew exactly what she had said. "Yes, I began playing when I was 7. Mama's idea. She thought it would make me more marriageable." The word carried a certain edge. Perhaps it did. "Is she married?"
I glanced down at her fingers and found them all bare.
She caught me looking and smiled. "I was married, but I'm a widow now." "I'm sorry." "Don't be." She said it with such finality that it suggested she did not want to speak of it further. "What composers move you?" I asked, in an attempt to change the subject, though I wanted to know more about this marriage she did not mourn. "Bach, always. The order of it appeals to me. And Beethoven, the late quartets especially, though I confess a weakness for Wagner despite his many failings as a human being." She paused, her fingers trailing along the stone railing. "Currently, I am working on an opera of my own." "An opera?" I moved closer. "What is it called?" "The 10th Muse." "And who is this 10th Muse?"
"The Greek poetess, Sappho," she answered. "Plato himself called her that."
"I'm familiar with her story," I said, remembering my education. "Ovid tells the story of her falling desperately in love with the ferryman Phaon, and when he rejects her, she throws herself from the Leucadian cliffs." Marie's smile changed. She looked at me as if I were a student who had almost gotten the answer correct.
"That is one version."
"What's the other?" "It's not important right now. Too long to explain properly." She turned back to the city lights in the distance. "Only to say there is more to the story than that."
"I've studied Greek history and mythology." The words came sharper than I intended. I did not like being dismissed as though I were a child asking questions beyond my comprehension. "I want to know what the other version is."
Marie turned, moved closer.
Each step echoed off the stone floor until she stood directly before me.
She reached up and touched my face with her bare fingers. I had not been touched like that before. Her skin against mine. Her thumb traced the line of my cheekbone with a gentleness that made my throat constrict. This was not the touch of a papa or a mama or even a friend. I glanced toward the ballroom doors, seeking assurance no one stood watching from inside. Behind the curtained windows, only vague shapes moved to the music. I closed my eyes. The soft pressure of her palm, the warmth of it against my cheek. It was not the last time she would touch my face, but it was the first, and the first has a quality the rest cannot recover. The doors burst open. Marie's hand withdrew so fast, I almost flinched at the loss of it. She stepped back, reaching for her gloves as Otto and 4 others spilled onto the balcony, laughing about something, too loud after the intimacy that had existed moments before.
"What time is it?" asked one of the young women I had not yet been introduced to.
"It is almost 11, Otto said cheerfully. "Midnight approaches. The unmasking will be soon. I cannot wait to remove this silly thing."
The unmasking. My agreement with Papa. We were to leave immediately following the unmasking. I had insisted. 12 chimes of the clock, and then Ernst would bring the carriage around, and we would depart, and
I would have to leave Marie behind. There was so much more I wanted to say, so many questions I wanted to ask her.
"Excuse me," I said.
I turned and fled back into the ballroom before anyone could respond. I searched the card room first, where tables of whist, piquet, and skat occupied men hunched over their cards with glasses of claret near their elbows. Papa wasn't among them, but General von Reinhausen was still there and informed me Papa had retired to the smoking room. The smoking room occupied the far end of the ground floor down a corridor lined with portraits of Bleichröder ancestors. I smelled it before I reached the door. Cigar smoke, brandy, leather, and beneath it all the faint scent of a fire burning low. After the perfume and flowers of the ballroom, it announced itself as a room women were not meant to enter. The door stood half open. I paused at the threshold. Dark walnut paneling rose from floor to ceiling. Deep leather armchairs clustered in conversational groupings, occupied by men whose faces were lit in amber gaslight. The wall sconces burned lower than in the public rooms, giving everything a dim, intimate quality. Smoke hung in layers near the ceiling. Hunting prints and military paintings lined the walls. A sideboard held crystal decanters and silver cigar boxes. Near the fireplace, a group had gathered around one of the armchairs. I recognized several faces, all friends of Papa. He stood among them, leaning slightly forward with his hands clasped behind his back in the particular posture of someone listening to a superior officer. The man in the chair spoke in a low voice that carried without effort. The whole problem is rooted in the question: does the state have the responsibility to care for its helpless fellow citizens, or does it not? I knew that face. Everyone in Prussia knew that face. Chancellor Bismarck sat with his legs crossed, one hand resting on his knee, the other holding a cigar. He wore his dark cuirassier uniform. White whiskers framed his face. At 63, he dominated the room. Men arranged themselves around him without being asked.
"I maintain that it does have this duty," he continued. "And to be sure, not simply the Christian state, as I once permitted myself to allude to with the words practical Christianity, but rather every state by its very nature."
A younger man, I didn't recognize, cleared his throat.
"But Herr Reichskanzler, surely there are limits to..." Bismarck's gaze shifted to him. The younger man stopped speaking.
"There are objectives that only the state in its totality can fulfill," Bismarck said. His voice hadn't risen. It didn't need to. Among these objectives of the state belong national defense, the general system of transportation, and the help of persons in distress in order to prevent such justified complaints which provide excellent material for exploitation by the Social Democrats. Several men nodded. A man near the fireplace murmured agreement.
"The socialists understand hunger," Bismarck said. "They understand desperation. They exploit it brilliantly. If we do not address the conditions that make men desperate, we will not contain them with laws alone."
This was the man who would suffer 2 assassination attempts in the coming months, attacks that would harden him further and lead to the anti-socialist laws that October. Somewhere in Berlin, Dr. Hödel and Dr. Nobiling were already preparing to carry out their deeds. Neither would succeed. Papa noticed me at the door. His eyebrows rose. He murmured something to the man beside him and made his way over. "Is everything all right?" "Yes." I kept my voice low. "I wanted to tell you. I'd like to stay longer, past the unmasking."
He studied my face with suspicion and a small amount of hope. "Yeah. Does this mean you've met some young man you wish to spend more time getting to know?"
Heat rose to my cheeks. "It's nothing like that," which was not a lie. "I've met some very interesting people," I continued. "I'd like to spend more time with them."
His suspicion lifted. "This is wonderful news. You need more friends."
I didn't know what he meant by that, and decided not to ask. "I'll call a footman at once," Papa said. "Ernst will need to know we're staying later than planned." He turned toward the door.
"Papa!" I caught his sleeve. "It's getting cool out. Please have the footman take Ernst some food and something warm to drink."
He smiled and kissed my forehead. "You're such a thoughtful girl, caring for those below you." I said nothing. Ernst had served our family since I was 7 years old. He had shown me his children's names carved into the wooden seat of the driver's box. I did not think of him as being below me. He was simply sitting outside in the cold while I danced in a warm ballroom. Papa disappeared down the corridor. I stood alone near the smoking room door, listening to Chancellor Bismarck as he continued speaking about the state, its obligations, and his vision for Germany's future.